A bull elephant, weighing over 6 tons, swings his trunk once, drops his head, and runs. The animal he is fleeing is barely half his size. 30 seconds earlier, the smaller bull did nothing but walk toward him in a straight line, ears pinned flat. A dark, tar-like fluid streaking down both sides of his face from a gland behind each eye. That single detail, a wet stain on a cheek, was enough. 6 tons of muscle and ivory simply gave way and ran, crashing through a stand of acacia, leaving the smaller animal standing alone in a cloud of dust he did not even have to raise himself. It is late in the dry season on the Savanna south of Mount Kilimanjaro, and the whole exchange lasts under a minute. It happens dozens of times a year across East Africa, and it upends almost everything people assume about power in the largest land animal alive. Bigger does not mean stronger here. Older does not always mean dominant.
For a few weeks or months at a stretch, one hormonal state rewrites the entire chain of command among males who have known each other and each other's rank for decades. Today, we are going to find out how a chemical window, not a body, decides which males get to breed and which ones get run off the plain, sometimes by animals they outweigh by 2 tons or more. Outside of that chemical window, elephant society runs on a slower, steadier logic. Females live in tight family units built around a matriarch, usually the oldest and most experienced cow, who carries the group's memory of water holes, danger, and drought years that can stretch back 60 years or more. Males are raised inside that family until puberty, somewhere around age 12 to 15, at which point the matriarch and her sisters begin shouldering them out, sometimes gently, sometimes with real force, until the young bull stops trying to rejoin the herd.
He spends the next several years drifting, sometimes alone, sometimes in loose bachelor groups where rank is settled through pushing matches, ear-flapping displays, and mock charges that rarely draw blood. 2 young males lock trunks and shove, testing weight and balance, and within a few seconds, one of them simply stops pushing back. Size and age decide almost all of it. A 10-year-old backs down from a 20-year-old automatically, without a real fight. It is a hierarchy built on decades, patient and mostly bloodless, and every bull on the plain has it memorized. Then Must arrives, and the whole system is suspended. Must is a distinct physiological state that healthy adult bulls enter periodically, usually once a year, lasting anywhere from a few days to nearly 4 months, depending on age and condition. During it, testosterone can spike to levels 60 times higher than an individual's own baseline. The temporal gland, positioned between the eye and the ear, swells visibly and begins secreting continuously, running down the face in dark streaks that other elephants can see from a considerable distance. Urine dribbles constantly, staining the hind legs and leaving a scent trail other elephants read like a signature. The bull adopts a posture researchers call the must walk. Head raised, ears spread wide, chin tucked in, moving with a stiff, deliberate swagger that announces his state to anything downwind long before he is close enough to smell directly. A bull in this condition will challenge animals twice his size and win, not because his muscles have changed overnight, but because nearly every other elephant on the plain has already learned, through past encounters, that a must bull is not worth the risk. The first complication is time itself. A bull entering must abandons feeding almost entirely, driven to leave his bachelor group and cover enormous distances, sometimes ranging far outside his ordinary territory, in search of family herds with a female in estrus. Researchers tracking must bulls have recorded them walking well over 50 kilometers in a single week during active search periods, stopping only to drink. He can lose close to 1/5 of his body weight before the state runs its course. Every day spent walking without properly feeding is a day closer to the point where his fat reserves collapse and must shuts itself off, chemistry overriding ambition, whether he has found a mate or not. He is racing a clock hidden inside his own body, and he has no way of knowing exactly how much time remains on it. He crosses a dry riverbed at midday, exposed and moving fast, well outside the protection of any herd. A lone bull in this depleted, hormone-driven state is measurably more vulnerable to lion prides than a healthy animal traveling with others. And researchers in several reserves have documented musk bulls killed this way, caught while distracted or too weak to defend themselves. Nothing happens this time. He reaches the far bank and keeps walking. The first family herd he reaches, late on the first day, has no female anywhere near estrus. Only mothers with calves and a handful of juveniles who scatter the moment his scent reaches them. He does not stay to test the matriarch's patience. A musk bull lingering near calves he has no real interest in mating with is treated as a threat, regardless of his actual intentions. And matriarchs have been documented forming a tight defensive ring around vulnerable young, trunks raised, whenever an unfamiliar musk bull approaches too closely.
He turns and keeps walking into the dark, one wasted day already gone from a clock he cannot see, his reserves a little thinner than they were that morning. By the second day, he finds a different family herd, and this time one female is showing the unmistakable signs of estrus, a window that lasts only 2 to 6 days out of a reproductive cycle that will not repeat for another 4 to 5 months, sometimes considerably longer given how rarely females conceive across a normal lifetime. But she is not undefended, and she is not passive. Female elephants actively evaluate the males around them. Young, non-musk bulls that approach too aggressively are frequently driven off through group defense or simply outrun. Researchers have documented estrus females fleeing unwanted suitors for hours at a stretch, sometimes covering several kilometers with the entire family herd moving in support, until an exhausted pursuer gives up and falls behind.
A female in estrus generally favors an older bull already in musk over anyone else in the vicinity, and she has ways of testing for that status before anything else happens. The complication is that every other male within smelling distance knows this too, and one is already crossing the tree line, walking the musk walk, glands running. He is bigger. He is also in musk. Two musk bulls meeting over the same female almost never resolves the way an ordinary dominance contest does. There is no ear-flapping negotiation, no mock charge that stops short. The two animals square off at a distance of perhaps 20 meters, tusks lowered, and drive into each other at a dead run. The collision is audible before it is visible, ivory grinding against ivory, a sound that carries across open ground far enough to send a nearby herd of impala scattering.
Both animals stagger under the impact, forelegs skidding in the dust, and recover within a second to drive forward again, foreheads locked, trunks curled up and out of the way to keep them from being crushed between the two bodies. Ears are pinned flat against the skull rather than spread, a subtle signal that this is no longer posturing. Field biologists working in Amboseli National Park have documented fights between musk bulls resulting in deep puncture wounds, snapped tusks, and on rare occasions, death. Injuries almost never seen in ordinary bachelor sparring. Rank in this contest is not decided by size alone. Researcher Joyce Poole's long-term studies at Amboseli found that the highest-ranking bulls tend to time their musk to coincide with the peak of the local mating season, and that their musk periods run longer and more intensely than those of subordinate males, a form of internal hormonal scheduling that effectively lets the strongest, most experienced males dominate the exact weeks when the greatest number of females are receptive, rather than simply out-muscling rivals year-round. The fight lasts under 2 minutes. The smaller of the two bulls, blood running from a gash above one eye,
breaks off first and retreats at a run, exactly as the bull did at the opening of this story. Rank has changed hands in under 2 minutes, decided by hormones scheduled months in advance rather than by anything happening in the moment. The winner does not simply mate and move on. He begins guarding, staying within a few meters of the female almost constantly, driving off any other male that approaches, feeding barely at all, resting barely at all. Part of that guarding behavior involves repeatedly touching the tip of his trunk to her urine or genital area, and then pressing it against an opening on the roof of his mouth called the vomeronasal organ, curling his upper lip into a distinctive grimace researchers call the flamen response. This lets him chemically confirm exactly where she stands in her cycle, information precise enough that experienced bulls can judge almost to the day when ovulation will occur. It is exhausting work, layered on top of an already starving, sleep-deprived body, and it leaves him distracted for exactly the kind of window a much smaller, non-must bull has been waiting for since the fight ended.
On the third day of guarding, a second must bull appears at the edge of the herd, drawn by the same scent trail that brought the first two together a day earlier. This time, there is no charge. The guarding bull simply turns to face him directly, ears spread to their full width, head raised into the must-walk posture, and holds his ground without advancing. The newcomer studies him for perhaps 10 seconds, close enough to register the older bull's continuous gland secretion, his stance, and whatever the frontalin ratio in his scent trail happens to signal about how much fight is actually left in him after yesterday's contest. He decides the numbers do not favor a second challenge on top of an existing injury he cannot see. He turns and walks away without a single further move, an entire confrontation settled by chemistry, read at a distance rather than by combat. Young bulls without any real hope of winning a direct contest rely on a different strategy entirely: patience.
While the dominant bull is occupied elsewhere in the herd, chasing off one threat or briefly resting, a subordinate male will sometimes make a fast, low, quiet approach and attempt to mate before he is noticed. Success rates for this sneak tactic are low, and getting caught mid-attempt can mean a serious beating from the guarding bull, tusks and trunk both involved. It is not, however, a wasted strategy across a population. Genetic paternity studies in several elephant populations have found that while must bulls father a large majority of calves in any given season, a meaningful minority, sometimes reported near 10 to 20%, trace back to younger, non-must males who succeeded through exactly this kind of opportunism. The iron hierarchy at the top does not fully lock every other male out of the gene pool. This time, no sneak attempt succeeds. By the fourth day of guarding, with 2 failed young challengers driven off and no further must rival appearing, the dominant bull and the female finally mate. He mounts her. It lasts well under a minute. A low, guttural rumble passes through his chest, audible from several meters away, and she shifts her weight once beneath him before it ends. Afterward, the 2 animals simply stand together for a while, trunks occasionally touching, before the herd moves on toward the next water source. It is a quiet ending to 4 days that involved a death threat, an actual fight with real injuries, a chase that covered kilometers, and a chemical negotiation most other species do not even have the biology to attempt. None of this is a modern discovery, though for a long time nobody understood what they were actually looking at.
The word must itself comes from Persian and Urdu, meaning intoxicated, a name given centuries ago by handlers working with captive Asian elephants, who noticed certain males periodically becoming unpredictable and dangerous, and had no framework for why. For generations, these episodes were treated as a kind of madness rather than a reproductive strategy, and dangerous bulls in must were sometimes chained for weeks at a time until the state passed on its own. It was not until the late 1970s and through the 1980s when researchers including Joyce Poole began long-term observational studies of wild African elephants at Amboseli
that must was formally separated from ordinary aggression and correctly identified as a distinct, hormonally driven reproductive state tied directly to competition for mates. Around the same period, biochemist L.E.L. Rasmussen analyzed the temporal gland secretion itself and identified compounds within it, including one called frontalin, that appear to broadcast a bull's must status and even his individual identity to other elephants at a distance, functioning essentially as a chemical name tag carried on the wind. Even the ratio of certain compounds within the secretion shifts over the course of must, meaning a female or rival male downwind can read not just whether a bull is in must, but roughly how far into the state he is, and by extension, how dangerous or how depleted he currently is. What 19th century handlers experienced as unexplained, terrifying unpredictability turns out to be one of the most precisely timed hormonal broadcasts in the animal kingdom, legible to any elephant with a working nose from 100 meters out. There is a common assumption, reinforced by decades of wildlife footage, that in the animal kingdom, the biggest male simply wins, full stop, and that female elephants are passive recipients of whichever male happens to reach them first. Neither holds up under sustained observation. Size sets a rough baseline, but it is regularly overridden by must status, by the precise timing of a bull's hormonal window relative to the local breeding season, and by direct female choice and resistance. Females actively flee unwanted males, favor specific partners, and in documented cases have been observed effectively screening out every non-must suitor during peak season, forcing them to wait for a year they are actually in the running. The hierarchy among bull elephants is real, but it is renegotiated on a chemical clock, not fixed permanently by tusk length or shoulder height. A second, related myth treats must itself as simple, uncontrolled rage, an animal briefly losing its mind. The record does not support that either. Must bulls direct their aggression with real precision, distinguishing between genuine rivals and animals posing no reproductive threat, timing their travel and their confrontations around a specific seasonal window, rather than lashing out at random, and in most encounters, resolving rank through posture and scent alone, rather than actual violence, as the second challenger at the edge of the herd chose to do. It is a controlled, expensive, seasonally scheduled reproductive strategy, not a breakdown of self-control, even though it looks like one from a distance. Not every bull who enters must finds a mate before his reserves run out. Some end the season having lost close to a fifth of their body weight for nothing, malnourished and depleted, considerably more vulnerable than usual to predation or to injuries picked up in fights they lost. A few do not survive the season at all, found weeks later by researchers tracking radio collars that stopped moving. The system has no sympathy built into it anywhere, and it does not average out kindly for every individual who enters it. What it produces instead is a strange kind of fairness spread across years rather than across individuals in any given season. A bull too young or too weak this year may, in 3 or 4 more years, time his own must into the exact weeks that matter and briefly outrank animals twice his former size, exactly as the bull he once fled from eventually will be outranked himself. Dominance among elephants is not a fixed trait carried permanently in tusk length or shoulder height. It is a temporary, expensive, chemically enforced privilege, rented for a matter of weeks and paid for in starvation, open wounds, and real risk of death. And somewhere on the plains south of Kilimanjaro right now, in this exact dry season, another young bull's temporal glands are just beginning to swell.